Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Nights. This is Kevin, and tonight we'll hear a tale as old as time. The roses in her father's garden had always bloomed out of season, as if responding to some secret music only they could hear. Belle would watch them from her bedroom window in the merchant's house, their petals unfurling in defiance of frost, their crimson hearts beating against the grey monotony of the port city where ships came, laden with silk and spices, but never magic. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, though youngest implied a certain childishness that had never suited her. While her sisters Celeste and Marguerite adorned themselves in whatever finery their father's fluctuating fortunes could provide, Belle adorned her mind with books, ancient texts that spoke of transformation or metamorphosis, of love that transcended form. Her father, Maurice, had built his fortune on understanding desire, what people wanted, what they would pay for wanting, how to make them want more. But he never understood his youngest daughter's desires, which seemed to tend toward the ineffable, the impossible. She wanted, she once told him, to see the place where the sky touched the earth. He had laughed, and not unkindly, and brought her an astrolabe from his next voyage. The astrolabe now sat on her windowsill, its brass surface catching the morning light on the day everything changed. The harbour bells were ringing, not in celebration, but in mourning. 3 of her father's ships had been lost in a storm, taking with them not just cargo, but the careful architecture of their comfortable life. "We shall have to sell the house," Maurice announced at dinner. His voice steady, but his hands trembling as they gripped his wine glass. "There is a cottage, my mother's old place, 3 days' ride from here. We shall make do." Celeste wept into her napkin. Marguerite raged about the injustice of it all. How their friends would laugh, how they would be ruined. But Belle felt something else entirely. A curious lightness, as if change she hadn't known she was wearing had suddenly dissolved. The cottage sat at the edge of a forest so old that the trees seemed to remember when the world was young. It was small, 4 rooms and a kitchen garden, But it was surrounded by wild roses that climbed the walls with passionate abandon. Belle loved it immediately. Now, their first winter was hard. They learned to milk their own cow, to coax vegetables from the reluctant earth, to mend their own clothes when they tore. Belle's hands, once soft from turning pages, grew calloused from work. But in the evenings when the fire crackled and the wind sang through the eaves, she would still read aloud to her father from her saved books. And for those moments, they were rich again. Rich again in all the ways that mattered. Spring came late that year, and with it, unexpected news. One of Maurice's ships, thought lost, had limped into port with its cargo intact. He would need to go to the city to settle affairs. A journey of a week at least. "Well, what shall I bring you?" he asked his daughters on the eve of his departure. "A dress of moonlight and pearls," said Celeste. "A necklace of stars," said Marguerite. Belle kissed his withered cheek. "Just come home safely, Papa. But if you see a rose more beautiful than any in our garden, perhaps you might bring it to me." He smiled at the simplicity of her request, not knowing that simple desires are often the most dangerous. Maurice's journey to the city proved fruitless. Legal complications, creditors with prior claims, bureaucratic tangles. In the end, he left with barely enough coin for the journey home. The late spring storm caught him in the forest as darkness fell, turning the familiar path into a maze of shadows and wet branches that clawed at his cloak. His horse, usually so steady, grew skittish as they pushed deeper into the woods. The trees here were different. They were older, darker, their trunks twisted into shapes that suggested frozen screams. And then, between one lightning flash and the next, he saw it. It was a castle that had no business existing, its spires reaching toward the storm-torn sky like desperate fingers. The gates stood open. No, more than open. Inviting. As if the castle had been waiting for him specifically. His horse walked through without hesitation, suddenly calm, and Maurice found himself in a courtyard where no rain fell, though he could see it sheeting down just beyond the walls. The castle doors swung inward at his approach. Inside, floating candles provided warm light, and a fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. A table had been set for one, laden with food that steamed as if just prepared. Maurice called out, but his voice seemed to be swallowed by the vast spaces of the hall. He ate. He was too hungry and cold not to. And then, exhausted, found his way to a bedroom where the sheets had been turned down and a nightshirt in exactly his size lay waiting. He slept. Morning light through stained glass windows woke him up. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Maurice dressed in his own clothes, which had been dried and mended in the night, and made his way through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves to speed his journey. In the courtyard, his horse waited, saddled and fed. And there, growing against the castle's eastern wall, was a rose garden of such beauty that it stopped his heart. The roses were every color roses could be, and several they couldn't. Silver like moonlight, black like the space between stars, gold like the first light of dawn. But there was one rose, drew him above all the others. Perfect crimson bloom. It seemed to hold all the world's beauty in its petals. Belle's simple request echoed in his mind. Surely, whoever owned this castle surely could spare one rose from such abundance. He reached out and plucked it from its stem. The world changed. The castle's warmth turned to ice. The light dimmed to twilight, and before him stood a figure that his mind struggled to process. Massive, covered in fur, with tusks that curved from a jaw too large for any natural creature. But the eyes were human, blue as winter sky, and filled with such rage that Maurice fell to his knees. "Thief," the beast said, and his voice was thunder and avalanche and the death of hope. "I gave you food, shelter, warmth, and you repay me with theft. Maurice gasped. My daughter. She asked only for a rose. A rose. The beast's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Do you know what you have stolen? That rose bloomed on the day a witch cursed me for my cruelty, for my inability to see beauty in anything but surfaces. One rose for each year of my curse. You have stolen time itself from me. Please, Maurice begged. Please, I'll do anything. Anything. The beast circled him, his massive form moving with unexpected grace. Then you will return here to die for your crime. Or... He paused, and something shifted in those human eyes. Or send me this daughter who desired a rose. Let her learn the price of careless wishes. Never. Then die now. The beast raised one clawed hand. Wait. Wait. Give me 3 days. 3 days to say goodbye. To set my affairs in order. I swear on my life I will return. The beast studied him for a long moment. 3 days. If you do not return, I will find you. And your death will not be so swift. Go. And so Maurice fled. The rose still clutched in his trembling hand. Its thorns drawing blood he didn't feel. Belle knew something was wrong the moment she saw her father's horse crest the hill. Maurice sat slumped in the saddle, aged a decade in a week. His face was the color of old parchment. She ran to him, caught him as he half fell from the horse, and helped him inside, where his sisters fussed and worried and demanded to know where their presents were. But Belle saw the rose in his saddlebag. Perfect and impossibly fresh. And she knew, with the intuition that had always set her apart, that this flower had cost more than gold. That night, after Celeste and Marguerite had gone to bed, Maurice told her everything. He wept as he spoke. This man who had weathered financial ruin with dry eyes. And Belle held him as she had not done since she was small. I will go back, he said. I have had my life. I've seen my daughters grown. I can face whatever comes. No, Belle said, and her voice was steady as stone. This beast gave you a choice, and the choice is mine to make. I asked for the rose. Belle, you don't understand. He is monstrous, terrible. Is he? She touched the rose, felt its petals soft as hope against her fingers. Is he really a monster who gave you food and shelter? Who let you go when he could have killed you instantly? Who tends a garden of impossible roses? She smiled, sad and certain. I've read enough stories to know that monsters are often more than they appear. She left that night, while her father slept exhausted by grief and her sisters dreamed of lives they would never have. She took only a few dresses, her favorite books, and then, of course, the rose. The horse knew the way. The castle stood waiting in the dawn light. More beautiful than terrible now, she could see it clearly. The gates opened for her as they had for her father. But this time, the beast was waiting in the courtyard. She had prepared herself for horror, but preparation and reality were different things. He was massive, yes, covered in dark fur that caught the light like midnight water. His face was neither human nor animal, but something caught between, featuring tusks and a broad nose and those startling blue eyes. But what struck her most was his stillness. The way he held himself apart as if afraid his very existence might cause harm. You came, he said, and his voice, though deep and strange, held wonder. I came, she agreed, dismounting with a grace that surprised them both. I am Belle. You have my father's rose, and I have come to pay his debt. You would die for a flower. Would you kill for one? They stood there, regarding each other across the courtyard, and something passed between them. Not understanding, not yet, but the possibility of it. I will not kill you, the beast said finally. But you must stay here. Forever. That is the price. Then I accept, Belle said, and walked past him into the castle that would become her prison, and perhaps something more. The castle was alive, not in the way of haunting, with spectres and cold spots and the clanking of chains, but alive like a sleeping giant whose dreams had taken architectural form. Doors opened before Belle could touch them. Fires lit themselves as she entered rooms. Books she had only heard of in whispers appeared on the library shelves, their pages falling open to passages that seemed to speak directly to her thoughts. The beast had given her the entire East Wing, a suite of rooms that reorganized themselves according to her desires. When she wished for more light, windows appeared. When she grew tired of a color, the wallpaper shifted like a living thing into new patterns. The castle responds to need, the beast explained on her third night, when they dined together for the first time. He sat across from her at a table that could have seated 50. His massive form, holding delicate china. Or perhaps to want. I've never been certain of the difference. Need is hunger, Belle said, cutting her meat with careful precision. Want is appetite. One keeps you alive. The other makes life worth living. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw surprise in those human eyes. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Everyone else has been. Perhaps, Belle said. Everyone else lacked imagination. He laughed. A sound like distant thunder that might have been frightening, if not for the genuine delight in it. Imagination. Yes. I suppose that's one thing I never valued before. Before? His expression closed. Before I became what you see. She didn't press. In stories she had learned, the most important truths emerged in their own time. like roses blooming in impossible seasons. They developed a routine. Mornings, Belle explored the castle, finding new rooms that shouldn't exist. A conservatory where it was always spring. An observatory where she could see stars even in daylight. A pool that reflected not her face, but her dreams. Afternoons were for the library, where she discovered not just books, but manuscripts, scrolls, tablets in languages that predated names. In the evenings they dined together. At first the beast was awkward, his clawed hands struggling with utensils, his size making every movement potentially destructive. But Belle simply moved the candelabras out of range and suggested they eat foods that required no cutting. She read to him after dinner, myths, histories, philosophies, and poems. His education, she discovered, had been quite extensive but narrow, focused on conquest and commerce rather than culture. "Why do you stay?" he asked one night, after she had finished reading. "You could run. I wouldn't stop you." Belle considered the question. She could lie, say she had given her word, that duty bound her. But something about the castle, about him, demanded truth. "Because," she said, "I've been running my whole life without moving. Running from the unexpected, the ordinary, the safe. Here, nothing is expected or ordinary or safe. Here I don't have to pretend to be satisfied with less than wonder." "You find wonder in imprisonment?" "I find wonder," she said carefully, "in impossibility." Summer descended on the castle like a held breath slowly released. The rose garden bloomed with violent beauty, and Belle learned that each rose held a memory. Not hers, but the beast's, from before his transformation. She discovered this by accident, reaching for a golden rose only to be suddenly elsewhere, elsewhen. She stood in a ballroom filled with beautiful people, and at its center danced a young man whose beauty was so perfect it seemed almost cruel. He moved through partners like a conqueror through territories, taking tribute in the form of sighs and longing glances. "That was me," the beast said. She hadn't heard him approach, but then, for such a large creature, he moved with surprising silence. "Prince Adam, they called me. Oh, ignorance of what hardly mattered. I owned beauty then, hoarded it, believed it was my right. Belle touched another rose, silver this time, and saw the same young man rejecting a beggar woman who sought shelter from a storm, mocking her ugliness, her poverty. She saw the woman transform into something terrible and beautiful, her curse falling like snow, transforming the prince's beauty to a reflection of his inner nature. She said I would remain this way until I learned to love and be loved in return. The beast continued. But who could love this? He gestured at himself with disgust. Perhaps, Belle said softly, someone who understands that love is not about surfaces. She began spending more time in the rose garden, living his memories, understanding the architecture of his curse. She saw his cruelty, yes, but also moments of almost kindness, stunned by pride. She saw loneliness that predated his transformation, an isolation that came from being loved only for his face. Why do you keep returning here? He asked one afternoon, finding her among the roses with tears on her cheeks from a particularly painful memory. His mother's death. The last time anyone had loved him for himself alone. Because, she said, your past doesn't disgust me. It makes me sad. Sad. For the boy who was taught that beauty was power, who never learned until too late that power without kindness is just another kind of poverty. That night, at dinner, he asked her about her own past. She told him about the merchant's house, about sisters who loved her but never understood her, about a father whose love took the form of worry. She told him about books that had been her windows into wider worlds, about the hunger that no amount of food could satisfy, because it was hunger for meaning, for magic, for more. We're both cursed, she said. You to be a beast on the outside, me to be one on the inside, never satisfied with ordinary life, always craving the impossible. You're not a beast, he protested. Aren't I? What would you call a woman who chooses imprisonment with a monster over freedom with her family? Brave, he said. Extraordinary. Autumn arrived suddenly, the leaves turning to flame overnight. Belle had been at the castle for 6 months, and the world beyond its walls had begun to feel like a dream she'd once had. But dreams have a way of intruding on waking life. The beast found her in the library one evening, staring at nothing, a book forgotten in her lap. What troubles you? His voice had gentled over the months, losing its edge of bitter anger. My father, she admitted. I dreamt of him last night. He was ill. He was calling for me. The beast was quiet for a long moment, then rose and led her to a room she had never seen before. At its center stood a mirror, tall as a door, its surface clouded with age. Ask it to show you, he said. And so Belle approached the mirror hesitantly. Show me my father. The surface cleared, and she gasped. Maurice lay in bed, terribly thin, her sisters weeping at his bedside. He was indeed calling for her. Her name, a whisper on his fevered lips. I must go to him, she said, turning to the beast with tears streaming down her face. If you leave, you will not return. His voice was certain, hollow. I will. I promise. Promises are just words. Words are just air. Then let me prove otherwise. She took his massive pawed hand in both of hers, feeling the careful strength there, the gentleness he had learned. Give me a week, 7 days. If I don't return, then you'll know your cynicism was justified. He looked at their joined hands, as if seeing something impossible. You would come back, truly. I have been happier here with you than I ever was in the world, she said, and realized as she spoke that it was true. But But I cannot let my father die believing I am dead or imprisoned. Let me say goodbye properly. He pulled his hand away and walked to the window, his broad back to her. Take the mirror. It will show you the way back, if you choose to use it. 7 days, Belle. After that, you'll come for me. After that, I'll know that even impossible roses can't bloom forever. The journey home took only hours, though Belle knew it should have taken days. The horse moved through forests that parted like curtains, across streams that solidified beneath its hoofs. She arrived to find the cottage in chaos, her sisters trying desperately to manage both the household and their father's illness. Maurice's fever broke the moment Belle touched his forehead. His eyes fluttered open, focused on her face, and he wept. My child, my brave girl, I thought he had killed you. No, Papa. He's not what you think. But how could she explain that the beast was gentler than any man she'd known? That his castle was more to her than any place she'd lived? That she missed him already, after only hours apart? Her sisters were full of questions, horror, fascination. The mirror, wrapped in cloth, she hid beneath her bed. She couldn't bear to look into it, to see what the beast might be doing alone in his castle, whether he believed she would return. The days passed strangely. The cottage felt too small, the village beyond it smaller still. People seemed flat after the beast's dimensionality, their concerns petty, their conversations dull. She found herself starting to tell stories about the enchanted library, the impossible roses, only to stop when she saw the fear or disbelief in their eyes. On the 5th day, her father was well enough to sit up, to take some soup. Her sisters had begun talking about finding her a husband in the village. A good, solid man who would help her forget her ordeal. That night, unable to sleep, Belle unwrapped the mirror. "Show me the beast," she whispered. What she saw stopped her heart. He lay in the rose garden, still as death, roses withering around him. His breathing was shallow, barely visible. Petals fell like snow, covering his prone form. She didn't remember saddling the horse. She didn't remember the journey. She only remembered bursting through the castle gates to find winter had come early here. Ice coating everything except the roses, which were dying in fast forward, their petals black with rot. She found him where the mirror had shown, half buried in dead petals. His eyes were closed. Beast, she fell to her knees beside him, pulling his massive head into her lap. Beast, please. I came back. I chose to come back. His eyes opened slightly, unfocused. Belle? But it's only been 5 days. I couldn't wait. I couldn't. She was crying now, her tears falling on his face. Please don't leave, please. I need you to stay. Why? The word was barely a breath. Belle knew suddenly and completely the answer that had been growing in her heart like an impossible rose. Because I love you, she said. Not despite of what you are, but because of it. Because you read with me and walked with me and never once tried to make me smaller to fit the world's expectations. Belle, I love you, she said again, fiercer now. And I don't care if that makes me strange or wrong or cursed myself. I choose it. I choose you. Light exploded from the beast's form, bright as the birth of stars. Belle shielded her eyes, felt power ripple through the air like heat shimmer. When she could see again, the beast was gone. In her lap lay a man, handsome but not cruelly so, his beauty tempered by something that hadn't been there before. Humanity, vulnerability, the knowledge of what it meant to be monstrous and to be loved anyway. But Belle found herself looking around frantically. Where is he? Where's the beast? The man, Prince Adam, she supposed, sat up slowly, looked at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Belle, it's me. The curse is broken. But she stood, stepped back, and he flinched as if she'd struck him. You don't want this, he said, wonder in his voice. You want the beast, not the prince. I want, Belle said carefully, the one who taught me that impossibility was just another word for having tried hard enough. The one who gave me a library that reorganized itself. The one who understood that beauty without kindness was poverty. Adam stood slowly, and she could see it then. The beast's careful grace in his movements, the wariness in his eyes, the way he held himself apart as if afraid of causing harm. "I'm still him," he said. "The curse changed my outside, but you changed what was within. I'm not who I was before. I can't be. I don't want to be." Belle stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. His skin was warm. Human. But in his eyes she could still see the winter blue, still see the one who had shown her wonders. "Then be both," she said. "Be the prince who learned to be beast, who learned to be human, be impossible like your roses." He laughed, and it was still thunder, still distance and delight combined. "And you? What will you be?" "Myself," Belle said. "But more. Always more." The roses around them began to bloom again, but differently now. They grew in spirals and fractals and patterns that spoke of order beyond understanding. The castle shimmered and settled into new configurations, neither prison nor paradise, but something between. Something chosen. "Stay with me," Adam said. It wasn't a command or a plea, but an invitation. Not because of curses or debts or impossibilities, but because we match, Belle finished. Both of us caught between forms, between worlds, between what is and what could be. They kissed then, in the garden where memories became roses and roses became promises. And if there was a magic in it, it was the ordinary magic of two people choosing each other, despite or because of their transformations.